While we've been disagreeing domestically about the long-term ramifications of the deal between the U.S., other allied nations, and Iran when it comes to their nuclear program, the Iranian president has been making his case domestically, and he's been doing it through Twitter. So he took to the very popular social media platform and has been talking about how well he thinks Iran did in the deal. So here are a couple of the tweets that Hassan Rouhani sent out. Bear in mind, by the way, that his account is not verified technically, but it does have over 140,000 subscribers, and so it seems likely that it is actually his account. We're going with that assumption. In regards to nuclear issue, I promise our people that first lock has been opened. We have shook the foundations of the sanctions regime. Talking about what they've got in terms of rolling back over the next 6 months some of the sanctions that the U.S. and other countries have imposed on Iran. Second, enrichment, which is part of our rights, will continue. It continues today and will continue tomorrow. Hashtag 100-day report. I just love that the Iranian president is using hashtags, by the way. YOLO. The important thing about the agreement in Geneva is not what happens during the coming 6 months, which is the span of the deal, but the principles on which we have agreed. And finally, we'll have enrichment on our soil and we'll end sanctions in a comprehensive accord. Iran will be treated as any other member of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Now that seems fair. Other countries are bound by the NPT. Why shouldn't they? But let's talk about what he's actually saying there, because we want to get ahead of this as part of TYT, because you know that later today, possibly tomorrow, Fox News is going to be using these tweets to trumpet how bad the deal was and how much we got rolled over by Iran when it came to our bargaining. Hassan Rouhani, as far as I know, is not sending this purely to gloat to the U.S. media or the U.S. political establishment. He has to worry about the domestic politics of Iran. He has not been president for a long time. In fact, as alluded to in the 100-day report, this is actually the 100th day of his presidency in Iran. Now, he is, so far as I know, somewhat popular, but engaging in any sort of diplomacy with the West in terms of some of the hardline elements of the Iranian government is not going to be popular. And so obviously he needs to gloat domestically about how well they did. Did you really expect that he'd be tweeting to Iran, man, we really got raped by the U.S. this weekend? No, of course he's not going to do that. Now, to some of the particular things that he references there, in terms of the sanctions, yes, they are going to receive some temporary relief from the sanctions, including, I think perhaps most controversially, receiving some of the funds that had been denied them in the past. I don't know about that. I assume it was a necessary component to secure a deal. You'll have to talk to John Kerry about that. Most controversially, when it comes to the enrichment, a lot of people who either don't know anything about nuclear power or nuclear weapons, or for the purposes of advancing a conservative message, will pretend that they don't know anything about nuclear power or nuclear weapons, will use the focusing of Hassan Rouhani in these tweets on enrichment to show that, look, they are still going to be able to produce a bomb. We got nothing. This has not in any way lowered our chances of stopping Iran from producing a nuclear weapon, which is categorically false. Enrichment is a necessity for producing a uranium-based nuclear weapon. That is entirely true. But it is also a necessity for most forms of nuclear power in the modern era. Now, the levels of enrichment required are vastly different. For you to weaponize uranium, you normally need to raise it to 80, 85, higher than 90% in terms of the enrichment. But most forms of nuclear power require 2, 4, 10, possibly higher levels of enrichment as well. And so, look, if you say, I don't trust them, I don't think they're going to use it for nuclear power, I have all the sympathy for your position that I could possibly have. Don't know at this point that I really trust them either, especially when you consider that this is a country that is almost literally floating on a great sea of oil and natural gas. Their need for nuclear power, I would have to imagine, lower than other countries like France, where it's become pretty popular. So you can say you don't trust him. That's perfectly fine. I don't trust him at this point either. But simply because he talks about enrichment does not mean that they can produce a bomb. Scaling back the scope of their enrichment could drastically lower the chances of them getting a bomb. It could certainly push back the date at which they could get a bomb, because the levels of enrichment required to produce a uranium-powered nuclear weapon, as I said, are very high, and it is incredibly time-consuming, incredibly energy-consuming as well. Maybe that's what they need the nuclear power for. But yeah, so when you hear Fox News talk about this in the next few days, don't believe that simply because Hassan Rouhani is excited about this means that we lost. It just means that he needs to deal with the domestic politics of his own situation in the same way that we would. If a Republican president gets into power in the next few years and has some sort of treaty or some sort of bargain with another country, they're not going to come back and complain about how bad they were bitch slapped domestically. That's just not how it works.